So I am going to talk about coastal systems, and I don't think I'm going to need the microphone, so I'm just going to talk probably from here. And we are going to see if I turn this off, see if this works, which it did earlier. So I'm going to provide a little bit of context about coasts. I know that if you live here close to the coast, and I'm going to talk about a number of different systems today. Just a little bit of context about why I think coastal systems are important. I'm going to focus on a case study of how the different challenges that I'm going to pose for coasts come together in the place where I spend most of my time working, and we're going to finish up that piece with a little transition to a short video, and then I'm going to finish up with a few remarks about what we need to know. What do we need to know? Not what does we need to know, excuse me. It must have been something I changed this afternoon. And ways of thinking about the future. And so I'm going to try and pull in a few examples from different places. I want to start with the issues about why people live at the coast. And coastal systems around the world have been important places and cradles of civilization for millennia, whether they are big, wide deltas like the Indus or the Chinese deltas, or whether they are fjords and ports, places that have provided a safe harbour, large fertile areas of agricultural land with good fresh water supply. Whatever, coastal systems have been important for a long time, and they're crucially important for us in the 21st century. There are some places where we originally settled in the United States, for instance, places that we go on vacation, places that are important for commerce. And some statistics here, which I'm not going to read through necessarily. I'm sure you all see and are familiar with these kinds of statistics about coastal systems. These are the kinds of things that one reads in the newspaper. 8 of the world's top 10 largest cities are located at the coast, and that figure may well be changing and probably increasing. I would doubt that number is going to go down over time. 44% of the world's population live within 150 kilometers of the coast. And so these systems are both important to people, but perhaps also, therefore, vulnerable to people. I want to just say, just to begin with here, I'm not going to talk about all kinds of coastal systems today, but there are, of course, a huge variety of different characteristics of coastal systems, some of which, as we just talked about, are those which make them important and valuable to people. But when we talk about coasts, areas where the land meets the sea, it could be anything from a coral reef to a rocky shoreline, from a sandy system to one dominated by large boulders, from mangroves to salt marshes, depending on where we are in the world and what kind of coastal physiography we have. And so this one just happened to be in the presentation already. And so you can see the coastline that you're familiar with and the coastline of southern Florida here and the Bahamas. Very, very different, but still subject to some of the same kinds of stresses that we're going to talk about today. This is just a little kind of example to set us up, just to remind ourselves about some of the kinds of challenges that people living at the coast and near coastal systems have caused for the natural environment here. And we're looking at the southern tip of Florida, down here at the Everglades system. And what you see in the white here are the municipal areas of Miami and Miami Beach and Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach and essentially 8 million people over here, and a huge area of agricultural land in the red there, massive production of sugarcane fields. And the results of this development, most of which occurred in the 20th century, is a huge change in the relationship between how the fresh water flowing through southern Florida meets the tide down here at the bottom. And so one of the things about coastal systems that I when I'm talking to people who don't work on the coast or aren't familiar with coastal systems, I frequently point out one of the differences that you have to think about when you think about how they work is that you have tides and waves. The water goes up and down on a regular basis. Of course, I don't have to tell you about that. You see that every day here. And wave action. These are important processes shaping coastal systems, which are not necessarily those that we think of as important further inland. So what's happened down here in coastal Florida is essentially We now have massive problems in here, as you see. The blue on here, that river of grass, which is considered so valuable ecologically, has essentially been channelized and canaled in the cause of agriculture, water supply, and to supply water to the people and to supply water to the agricultural areas. Dramatic changes in habitat loss and endangered species of the order of 20 at the moment, and huge problems with water quality. So just one example. It receives a lot of attention in the United States. It's just one example of how people living there doing things that are very important to them have caused some changes. Another one on the west coast here, San Francisco Bay. The city of San Francisco is just here on the peninsula. This is the Golden Gate here. This is the Sacramento River would be over to the right side of these figures. And what you see on these, which are from the Habitat Goals Project, is just the difference in the changes that we have made in that system between the mid-19th century and here in the late 20th century. And what you see very dramatically there is a change in green. The green is gone. The green essentially was the tidal marsh in the system, and that has been drained and converted into agricultural land or airports or developed land. One particular area, down there, just down here, one area that is I've done a little bit of work on down here in the South Bay, in the red area, was converted to salt ponds. We lost that tidal marsh, and this was a good environment for producing salt, which was obviously very important to the local populations and to many aspects of current day life. And these different colored areas, if you've ever landed in San Francisco Airport, then you will have seen these multicolored ponds that you fly over as you approach from the south. And now there is an effort to restore about 15,000 acres of salt ponds down here, and to provide some kind of flood protection for the city of San Jose down here. I don't think I can point it out, but Google headquarters, I think, is about here. This is Silicon Valley. Huge development around the South Bay. The natural environment dramatically altered. But what kind of natural environment do we want in the South Bay? And I think this kind of typifies this tension between the value that the natural environment provides and the things that people expect in terms of quality of life when they live near the coast, and the way in which people interact with the natural environment. And so we have issues down there in South San Francisco Bay of flooding in San Jose when there's a really high tide and the wind's from the wrong direction. We have endangered fish, we have endangered birds, and we have people who really want to interact and be out there in the natural environment. And so when we look at a restoration opportunity like this, we have the opportunity to go backwards, perhaps, towards something more natural compared to the changes that we made in the 19th and 20th century. But what is it that we want to achieve with that? How are we going to do that? And just another quick example here, Venice in the Mediterranean. The idea of trying to find sustainable solutions for these great cultural icons,